can do it. Yep, ready to go.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying your lovely sandwich. My name is Elaine Ayala, and I'm a columnist for the Express News, where I also write religion and media affairs. I'm going to give you a minute to calm down here. I'm going to take another sip of my coffee. I'm still working on coffee. I wanted to start this discussion by, I love, as much as I'm a news person, I love hopeful stories. I love stories with wonderful endings. And I'm going to tell you one that's related to the digital divide. I've yet to tell it in the paper, but I soon will. And that is that I met a housekeeper from a local university who was really freaked out that she would soon have to fill out her time card via computer. She had never touched one. She was very nervous about it, and she sort of made herself the representative of her entire work class and went to a person in charge and said, we really need to learn just how to sit at a computer and do this task that we'll have to do every day. It was sort of the equivalent of a time machine where you have to click in and click out. So she found a very friendly face at the university who does this for a living. She teaches computers and learned, a whole group of people learned not only how to clock in and clock out every day, but then started to feel more at home with that click and that access. And so I'll jump ahead to the end of the story. The housekeeper bought a laptop because she was so interested and got internet access. And then, because she's such a good cook, the university decided, well, now all these people are very engaged. Let's create something that they can produce that we can put in our archives. So cooking was the key. So the university asked each of the housekeepers involved in this project, give us a recipe. Now they're very cagey. They also said you need to make this recipe so we can taste it. So they gave themselves a party. And now that those little cookbooks produced by all of those housekeepers that have family recipes and memories is in the archive of the University of Texas at San Antonio. And what this story comes down to is that that laptop for that housekeeper became her self-esteem. And so I want to leave you with that story and then introduce this panel that will tell us how this all came about and I hope also next steps. Is this the first conference you do like this? This is the second one, so we keep pushing the envelope forward. Okay, so our panelists, did I introduce myself? I think I did, right? No? Okay, I'm the religion reporter and the minority affairs reporter for the Express News. I write a column on Latino politics, arts, culture every Monday in the Express News, page 2. Get your subscription. And I'm a native San Antonio. With us on this panel are the three tri-chairs of this event. Jordana Barton, she's senior advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Now, how cool is that? Diane Cuellar, she's the principal at Center of Gravity Strategies. She's a media relations and strategic communications expert. And Amanda Kiemer, she's the vice president of cybersecurity at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. So I want to open it up with Amanda. Amanda, you must be very excited that UTSA is going to devote significant resources to cybersecurity. So I'd love to know that that side of it. But tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to this issue. You all are so diverse in your fields, but you all care about this digital divide. So tell us how you came to this important policy and topic.
Sure. So hi everybody. Are you awake? I'm going to talk loud because I know in the back I couldn't hear some people. So hi, my name is Amanda. First of all, thank y'all for coming. This is really, really important conversation for our city. This is a really big issue to tackle. I don't want to minimize that at all. It's very important and encouraging for us to see all y'all here, and we know that there are a lot of different backgrounds represented, so thank you for taking time out of your day. So my background, as you heard, I work at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce. What a lot of people don't realize is that at the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, we have the Cybersecurity San Antonio program. And so that program is a hub for all things cyber in San Antonio, just like the name says. We didn't make anything too crazy with that. And so we work with K-12, higher ed, industry, workforce, small contractors, large corporations, the city, state, federal government. Anything that touches cyber, I get to play a role in that. And San Antonio is my hometown, so I'm particularly invested in its continued growth in this space. How I came to digital inclusion, I'm an SISD alum, very proud SISD alum. I'm always very biased, so I have to say that up front. So I went to Neal Elementary. I grew up off Blanco and Bassi, not far from here. I went to Tafoya Middle School, and then I graduated from Brackenridge High School. So when you're talking about digital divide, now that I'm back in San Antonio, I worked in DC for 8 years. I just moved back to San Antonio last summer. Digital divide is very real, and it's very frustrating, and it's very infuriating, to be honest, when it comes to students not having the ability to access information that can make or break their careers, or that can impact scholarships that they receive, or for me, trying to find technical mentors that can come out to schools, and then having those technical mentors for Cyber Patriot get frustrated because those students have firewalls and they don't have IT people on campus, and the IT people don't get it, and it's not their fault because they're overwhelmed and underworked and underpaid and all of that. It's a whole thing. So I think for digital inclusion, I guess my story is just, it affects me, it affects my cousins today, who live on the west side, for people who want to buy houses on the west side, for folks who want to reinvest in the west side. All of that brings me to digital inclusion.
And just basic things like applying for scholarships is a difficult issue.
Yeah.
Do you see the, I want to follow up with that. Do you see the SAISD or other school districts moving forward? And I'll give you one, another anecdote that came to us right after a beautiful library was dedicated on the south side, the Mission, right near Mission Drive, and it's a gorgeous, and that side of town really needed a new library. And several people called some reporters and said, you know what we're finding is that when we leave and close up the library, there are a whole bunch of cars parked there and kids with a gleaming screen still working, and their parents, you know, falling asleep at the wheel because they're trying to finish their homework. Are you hearing stories like that when you're in the schools?
Unfortunately, yes, and I don't think it's just K-12, I think it's university too. And so since coming back to San Antonio, one of the stories I like to share is that I sucked my first year of college, and I went away out of state, came back, and I think looking back, having vocabulary to explain that problem, when it comes to access to information and infrastructure and the digital divide, those are things you don't know about when you're an 11th grader or a 6th grader. You don't know your economic status, your class status. You don't know about any of those things. You just go to school and you say you're going to go to college and then you're going to get a job. And so I think I can see those stories of folks in the parking lot. I think our panel this morning really discussed how we need to fix that, and that it's a community effort, and that we have to hold our elected officials and our city government, local, state, and even federal government accountable for that. And I think those of us who have the luxury to be here today and take time off of work to learn, we have the responsibility to then go back and educate our colleagues and our bosses and our friends and our family members to get involved. I will say to your first point about UTSA, there are a lot of encouraging initiatives taking place in the city. There are a lot of folks stepping up, creating nonprofits, making it happen, making sure that students are learning about opportunities, particularly in cybersecurity. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to say there are other universities in San Antonio that have excellent cybersecurity programs. So we are the only city in the nation to have 5 centers of academic excellence in one city. So we have UTSA, we have St. Philip's, we have San Antonio College, we have Our Lady of the Lake, and Texas A&M San Antonio. So there are 5 different universities you can go to for that. And I think our students need to know that so they can develop those partnerships with those professors and have more of an smooth transition into those spaces.
One more question before we move to Deanne. One of the major issues that people have in their homes is that having access to internet is getting more and more expensive. What do people at the chambers of commerce all over, what are they doing? How are they championing those people who cannot afford? It's one thing to own a laptop. That's probably easier to own a laptop and get one than it is to pay a monthly bill that's getting more and more expensive to access the internet. Tell us about what we can expect from chambers of commerce and our business community to make that more accessible.
Right. So I think a good example is that we're here, right? So being involved with this conference, putting together these panels. I know it seems like admin logistics work, but I think when you think of a chamber of commerce, you might think of just businesses, but a chamber of commerce is not just businesses. There are schools involved, there are university presidents, there's local, state, federal government officials, members of Congress and their staff. And so our Cybersecurity Industry Council is 250 members strong, and that represents the industry's impact here in our city. The reason I say that is because through all these different sectors, whether it's education, workforce, talent development, it's not just going to be industry-led, right? It's a community-led problem or a community-led solution that's going to be the answer. And so I think in as much as we can incorporate all those ideas and people, that's the only way we're going to solve it. I don't think it's just on the Chamber of Commerce. I think it's these larger coalitions that are building that are representative of all of people in this room.
Okay, well, I wish Spectrum was here because I have something to say to them. But, okay, Dion. You're a media specialist. A lot of reporters around town know you because you've been the spokesperson for one councilman or another. You've been involved in we get a lot of press releases from you. So how does a person like you get involved in this issue? Tell us about your passion for this topic.
Wow. Okay. So the media representation part of my work actually goes pretty far back. In 2005, I was working here in San Antonio with a large group of public access producers that were they themselves going through a transition when we were moving everything from analog TV to digital TV, and public access producers were going online. And I've actually been on the opposite side of this issue throughout the years. And the reason why I got involved with the public access producers is because at the time there was something called Senate Bill 5 that was at the state level that was deciding how we funded cable access producers, how we funded, how internet service providers funded the markets that they served in. And luckily that there are 2 people in the room I actually got to work with 13 years ago. One of them being Gabriel Garcia, who was working with the city of San Antonio at the time, that was, kind enough, to, shed light on how these policies impacted us at the municipal level. And I actually got to meet up to 83 different public access producers and community organizers like Andrea Figueroa, who's also in the audience. And we went on to co-found something nationally called the Media Action Grassroots Network. And so that Media Action Grassroots Network, if you're not familiar with it, if you go online, there are social justice organizations and community groups that are not internet service providers, they're not digital literacy professionals, they're not people that are actually doing this work, but they are individuals that are doing all sorts of work around racial justice, immigration, women's rights, civil rights, and human rights that understand how the complexities of digital inclusion impacts their work and the importance of preserving the internet because they use that as a communications tool to communicate their work to the community. Fast forward what that works look like later on, me and Andrea worked on the local to national level. She'll talk about this a little bit more, but we actually spent several years advocating to protect the internet and all of the things that the communities use that are empowered with the internet at the national level. So we've done everything from meeting with lobbyists, speaking to our Congress people, speaking to our senators, working with the FCC, we've met with commissioners, we've done filings, and I'm proud to say that we played an active role with a delegation from San Antonio and the state of Texas to fight for net neutrality.
What is the status of net neutrality now?
So the status of net neutrality is it's in a different place than it was when Obama was president. So every president that comes in has their favorites and has a different philosophy about that policy. Councilman Pelias talked a little bit earlier about the importance of net neutrality. For me, net neutrality means that if you have access to the internet, the free flow of information should be open. And for me, one of the oldest anecdotes or analogies that we use is the difference of people in our community having access to a dirt road versus an internet highway. So, yeah.
Not good. All righty. Not good. Jordana is all over the place today, isn't she? She is the she is the senior advisor at the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. That's such a chingona kind of role. So how does a banker get involved in this issue? Why was it important to you?
No, that's a good question. I get it a lot. What does the Federal Reserve have to do with the digital divide? And the Federal Reserve, as you all know, is in charge of the macroeconomy, right? Making sure that we have stable prices, moderate interest rates, and a sound economy. We are the regulator of banks, financial institutions. And my job at the Federal Reserve is to work at the community level. I'm responsible for the Community Reinvestment Act and training bankers in how they can invest in low and moderate income communities. So I do a lot of training and so forth, but I also do a lot of research. And my research at the Federal Reserve is action research. So I do mixed method research to talk about the communities that we have to write about and understand and bring stories forth to inform the macroeconomy and to inform policy. I have to do mixed method research because, like we talked about in the earlier panel, the census data will tell a certain story, but it's not the full story. And you might miss out in the most important stories. So I was doing research here in San Antonio and along the Texas-Mexico border, and I was studying basic infrastructure like water, wastewater, electricity, the lowest income people in the colonias, their access to those things. They were talking to me about the digital divide, how it's impacting their children. One of the most profound areas of the digital divide is in the homework gap, which you've mentioned.
Which is lovely because they're already thinking about their children's future and how a computer and internet access is going to affect their ability to move forward.
How they couldn't do their homework at home. One lady after one of my focus groups, and I would have never known this. I had my little questions, and I didn't know to ask that question, but it came up across the border, so I documented it because I do a mixed method research. So that helped me to tell the more complete story. She says, "Can you make this a Wi-Fi hotspot because my little boy has to do his homework?" So I handed it to my intern, and we were like, "No, you can't because there's not the infrastructure to support it." And she didn't have the kind of data plan that she would need either to be able to support it. So it came to the top of my of the agenda. And what I write about in Closing the Digital Divide is how I came to understand through data and interviews and focus groups that digital inclusion is economic inclusion now. It is the platform, right, for everything. And as Amanda was really pointing out, it's a means to an end, right? It's not to have access just in and of itself. It's what it provides. A child can do their homework, can have a level playing field in school. You can create opportunity. Entrepreneurs, the promise of the internet is that it's democratizing, right? That no longer are innovations just happening at the center of the network. Now, a person in their computer and little knowledge of code can create Google or Facebook or Airbnb or, these huge, wonderful companies. Our children that we can unleash if they have access. They can create some of the solutions, the businesses, the social enterprises that are going to address some of our greatest social problems, but not if we have the digital divide, not if we don't have that level playing field. So my job was to understand the economy, how to create an inclusive economy, and indeed I discovered, with the help of really the lowest income people in the country, and that this is a structural barrier to upward mobility because of how it impacts everything. For banking, critical. As banking becomes digital, more and more people left behind. That's really very important to the Federal Reserve, that people have a safe relationship with a bank or credit union, because that matters to their whole future, right? So all of those things is why we got involved and made it part of the Community Reinvestment Act too.
That's awesome. Amanda, I wanted you to address the entrepreneurship piece of the digital divide. And I know you just don't deal with businesses, but we know that San Antonio has an immense wealth of small business people. And what has been your take as you look at that landscape? How connected are they, and how is the lack of connectivity impacting their business?
So lots of different ideas. So I think just quick background. So even though I was born and raised here in San Antonio, I just moved back last summer. So I just want to preface that with, because we all have access to information, get out there and meet people and learn what's going on in your community. That's going to be my disclaimer, my homework for y'all today. So based on what I've learned this past year, there are tons of resources for entrepreneurs in this city, and our barriers to entry are pretty low. And what I mean by that is that San Antonio is a pretty friendly city. We're a welcoming city. We have access to our mayor, to our city council, to business leaders pretty easily, right, compared to other cities. Like in DC, if you wanted to meet somebody like that, you better be important or have a lot of money or have something big to say. But in San Antonio, that's very different. And I think that's something that we need to take advantage of when it comes to entrepreneurs, especially with students. They have access as well. We need to bring them along with us. And so when I think of the resources available, even if you don't have access to internet, we have Lift Fund on the west side, right? Even if you don't have access to the internet downtown or you don't have super fast speeds, we have a library that's open till 9 p.m. on the weekday that has launch essay, right? We have the Maestro Entrepreneur Center. We have the UTSA Small Business Development Center, which is a fantastic resource. They have small business advisors for free, AKA like federal taxpayer money, right? We're paying into it, we should be getting that back. But they have advisors that all you do is call them up, and then they call you right back, they email you right back, you have a meeting set up, they walk through all these resources, they check in on you. That's their job, because at the end of the day, to get that federal money the next year, they have to show how many small businesses have started, how many jobs they're creating, how many resources they're developing, what's the impact on the community. That's on them, that's not on us. It's on us to develop the ideas and have the vision to make that happen and to run with that. But there are so many resources in our city, and so I think we're really lucky to have that. And I think when it comes to the digital divide, we have to tackle that as well. But, the other day I got a little frustrated with somebody because they were saying, I understand San Antonio, it's hard because not everybody grew up surrounded by founders and entrepreneurs. And I kind of called them on it. I said, that's BS. Like, I grew up with, a paleta man riding his bike through the neighborhood. That's an entrepreneur. I grew up at the FOIA. We had the ice cream truck lady outside our school every day that had everything that's an entrepreneur, right? That's a founder. And if she had multiple trucks, then she's like expanding her business, right? And so I think in some ways we have to redefine for ourselves and our community who is an entrepreneur and who is a founder and how do they access those resources, and make sure we're being inclusive in that as well, because technology, I love cybersecurity, I love technology, but we did not create entrepreneurship and we did not create innovation or entrepreneur, startup founder mentality. We are, I think, a city of hustlers, and I'm very proud of my city and my hometown. And I think we have to kind of foot stomp that a little bit more, that we already have these innovation and resources here. We just have to make sure they're connected. And I think technology, like you said, is a tool to make that happen.
I guess, Jordana, did you want to address that?
I think that I definitely think what Amanda is saying is true and accurate. There's another part to this, and that is, we talk in the city about creating an ecosystem for entrepreneurship, but one of the very important things for the Digital Inclusion Alliance is to make sure we have the broadband infrastructure and people with the digital and technical skills they need for the workforce to be able to attract, to keep entrepreneurs here, to build their businesses and attract industry. So in other words, I gave the example this morning, HEB, built their innovation center in Austin. And that, for me, as I always say, it's my HEB. How could they do that to me? And we have the Digital Inclusion Alliance.
Did you feel a little betrayed by that?
I felt betrayed, especially as part of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, because we are organized around this issue. And what is innovation but taking a little bit of a chance, and it's not much of a chance with the people of San Antonio and what we have going here, to have that here, to build our tech center here with Tech Block and all the others that are trying to build this innovation and this entrepreneurship and so forth. How can companies also say, we believe in you? We don't just want you for your dollars to come to our stores, because we're good at going to get those tortillas and everything else, right? Especially the siete tortillas.
Can I hop in real quick? I just want to say, so I'm going to do a little selfish shout out, but there are two people that work for cybersecurity/IT companies that are headquartered here in San Antonio. So IP Secure is one of them, and their CTO is here. And Bill Gonzalez works at Webhead, and they're another one here. So even if we have some opportunities that do not stay here, we have lots of cyber and tech companies that are investing in our community. And not only that, but they're in our schools, and they're helping to bridge the digital divide by hosting students who want to compete in Cyber Patron and other competitions. So we're finding creative solutions to this. It's just all happening at once, and we're trying to do it all.
And that's what
but we need more hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not to say that nothing happens here, right? Everything happens here. But it's that we need a very concerted effort and to really win the trust. And we don't want to have the brain drain. Like in the Valley, we talk about that all the time. Ruben and Art and the people from Brownsville that are here and McAllen. We have examples of students who grew up in the colonias and they went to Stanford to get their engineering degree and running a business, an incredible online business out of Silicon Valley, when she could have it in the border if there was the broadband infrastructure, the ecosystem for entrepreneurship to support it. So that's what it's about. It's not an either or. It's we want to all.
I can't wait to go to a paleta seller and buy my paleta, with my iPhone. That's what I'm hoping for. I mean, we do it at the Pearl all the time with all those, so why can't we do it with the paleta man? I think it's possible. Okay, Diane, we need more from you. Tell us what's on your mind. Tell us what you'd like to see from this conference. What should be talking about? What should we be talking about next year at this time that will move the needle?
I would really like to see next year's conference focus more on the human rights, civic engagement aspect of digital inclusion. This year, where there's a heavy focus on the economy, the value add, the return on investment, the theme is upward mobility. And so I kind of, we're almost, almost done with the day, and we've been heavily focused on, how this is good for the economy, and how we can lift each other up. And there's this, now we're talking about entrepreneurs and small businesses and resources. And I think aside from that, just like other issues, there's this human rights aspect, and just the civility and humanity of being able to communicate with each other, just like other issues are there's a human side, and there's not necessarily like an investment and return on the investment, and you're not going to always see your money. And I think it's interesting that there is a heavy focus on economy and putting a price tag to the return on the investment around this issue, because up until digital inclusion had a term, digital equity, and all of these other insider terms that we use to describe this issue, there are people who work in technologies, either cybersecurity or the IT professionals that work at these companies, that know that technology in itself, whether it's software or hardware or infrastructure and so on, is one of the most expensive things to invest in, that doesn't necessarily have a profit, there's not a return on that investment, there's not always a profit reward, and there's it being one of the most expensive line items in a budget, you don't always, hardly if ever, see the return on investment. So I think it would be nice, back to my original point, next year, if we could put the economic side apart. I understand that that's the shiny object this year, and just talk about like the human right of being able to communicate with each other freely and openly.
And they're more connected. Empowerment from the civil rights and human rights side it feeds back into the economy. They're more connected than. Well, but I would love to see that, more human rights people in the audience telling us what they're experiencing when it comes to this issue. We just have about 5 minutes left, and I want to leave a little time for some questions or comments from people who have also been in this struggle, in this campaign for a while, and we'd welcome your contributions. Yeah, questions or comments, really, because I know that we're all sitting here, but you're sitting there, and you're just as able to comment, and we'd love to hear from you. Those sandwiches couldn't have been that good. I saw them. Okay. All right, here we go. So can you come forward so you can take this mic?
Testing. Okay, my question was, for those that are in the technology community, how can we participate and get involved, especially when it comes to tech mentorship, or, I mean, it's going to be more difficult and challenging a longer road for us to get involved and help build infrastructure, but very immediately, very near term, we could all get involved and help, pass our skills on to the next generation. So my question would be, what's the best way to enable change that way?
You can leave the mic out there. So easily, I know there's some teachers here. I know Dr. Davis is here from CastTech. Vivek is going to be on a panel in a sec from ESC Region 20. She's also chair of the SA STEM Council. I'm sure there are other teachers, educators in this space. I would just reach out to them. Honestly, sometimes you just have to call a principal or find the CTE director at a school and just reach out to them. And they'll put you to work. It's not hard. They have tons of needs, whether it's bringing in technology, like Mooney mentioned for Saha, they reuse laptops, desktops. So if your organization is going through a refresh and you're going to donate that stuff or sell it back anyway, consider maybe donating it to a school or to Saha or another organization that could use it. There are tons of different ways that you can volunteer. I would say just get involved, and if you're still lost, I will connect you to a bunch of people.
To be a member of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, because we're going to have opportunities for leadership and for connecting with all these different organizations that Amanda pointed out, and it'll be that connection. It's meant to be that connection.
So I'm Dale McNeil from the library, as Renee pointed out earlier today. I just want to make a really very small comment from earlier in the discussion about the Mission Library, because I think it illustrates kind of the complexity of this, of what we're talking about, or one of the complexities, which is why were those kids outside the Mission Library using our Wi-Fi? Because we meant them to be, right? Because we made sure that that Wi-Fi was available for people to use, even when we couldn't afford to staff the library to be literally open. So that was a choice we made in all of our libraries, and I know that wasn't.
I didn't mean it as a criticism. I meant it as the need that was out there.
I didn't hear it as a criticism at all. But my point is just that we can do these incremental things, and they have also sometimes two sides.
That's right.
So
that's right.
that's all I'm saying, is that little
Absolutely.
incremental steps can move us forward as well. No, I didn't hear it as a criticism.
Yeah,
wanna be
I
clear
thought
about that.
I was inspired by it because there were parents sitting out there with their children, and it was, 10 o'clock, way beyond the library's time. So I applaud the library. I also applaud Bibliotech. I'm so glad you're here, girls. I don't know if they're even hearing because they're both so involved. Look, they're not even looking up. That's another digital divide. I go through this with all my nieces and nephews. Hello, hello. I love it. Hi. I just wanted to say that we love Bibliotech. My goddaughter, Maria Elena Martinez, is one of your managers, and I go to it all the time just to scan things and get your help on things like, here, help me, I'm old.
I wanted to say something really quick about the Mission Library, about talking about the human stories, the people that are out in the community, the ones that check out the devices, the people in the cars. Several years ago, we would go to the city council in the county and other elected officials, and we would try to talk to them about digital inclusion and try to define the digital divide for them. And we would point them to lots of things to read on the internet, and we would give them lots of publications, but it wasn't until we took a picture of people sitting in their cars outside of libraries, it wasn't until we took pictures of people sitting in McDonald's late at night to do their homework that we piqued the interest of some people. And I say that because I think it takes all of it. It's yes and, it's not one or the other. And so I think that now that we know about these stories, those stories of seeing the mother in the parking lot in the dark with the light on doing the homework, it kind of propelled us forward. It gave us a little bit more urgency to talk about that issue. And we got together and we wrote the papers, and we started to do that work. And I think it's, more of those stories are necessary because this issue is going to change, right? When we fix one thing, whether it's a more robust infrastructure, whether it's more access to devices and literacy training, there's something new is going to pop up, because just like water and electricity and other utilities, it's something that we're going to continue to need to work on and protect and scale and sustain.
Oh, yes, go right ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is LaHuana Chambers Lawson. So one of the hats that I wear is I teach project management at UIW. And one of the things that I always notice is that my students struggle, like sincerely struggle, with like actually wanting to be connected. It's not that they don't have the access. They have the access. They just don't want. And I'm getting to a place now where it's just like if you look around the room, and I think we saw this example epitomized just now, engaging multiple, like different generations of individuals is going to require for us to kind of be a little bit more innovative in terms of how we come together, right? So, for example, we're here right now, but a great example would be, we're streaming live, okay? I'm getting to a place now, even with my own small business, right? I'm doing multiple different things. I did a poetry and wine for a cause. Now I'm doing a growth mindset talk, and that's going to be Facebook Live. I'm trying to find different mediums to engage people, right? Because we're getting to a place where there's just so much information. There's so much going on.
Keep up all the time.
Right, and it's kind of like, okay, so how do we connect and get out of silos and try to find ways to address those human rights and civil rights issues that are still very pointed till this day, right? It's hard to have those conversations with different people that don't think the way that we think, because it's very hard to figure out how to tap into them. So it's like, I think we just kind of have to challenge ourselves to be uncomfortable and find different innovative ways of just engaging people that ordinarily wouldn't show up, right?
I think it's success when one of my elderly relatives wants to look up Luis Miguel, you know, and wants to see that on a phone. So I take success everywhere it comes, you know.
Hi, this is Angelique with Goodwill San Antonio. So I just wanted to share about some of the work that we have done about the theme. So the question I believe of the talk right now was why now, and about upward mobility. So you know, our experience in our career centers, where we welcome about 15,000 individuals annually. Following the work of the Digital Inclusion Alliance, we started tracking data about the digital divide, and we found out that about 40% of the clients that come to the centers today are disconnected and do not have the skills to be able to use a computer device. So those individuals, if they usually come to the Good Career Center, is because they have some sort of challenges to employment. So they are the individuals that we are targeting to try to achieve that upward mobility so they can sustain themselves and their families. So when we think about why now, I think it's important that the digital divide also touch about all the other aspects. So usually people who are disconnected are people who have a low education attainment. There are individuals who are in unstable housing, are individuals who have previously been incarcerated and have been disconnected from those tools for a long time. So when we think about the digital inclusion and upward mobility, I think it's really about how we're going to be able to address the digital divide within that context of the other barriers that those individuals affected by the divide are facing. Because it's not usually it's not all. Being able to provide them with the connectivity or the skills is not necessarily going to be sufficient to bring them to that upward mobility. And it's unfortunately never a straight path. They are often, again, those individuals face a lot of other challenges that require a systematic approach from our community on how we're going to address housing, how we're going to address education, so they can lift themselves up. So just wanted to share that. And why now? Because we need you, need everyone. Everyone in this room. It's definitely a systematic approach for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelique. And I was just going to address too what my friend, the professora from IUW, mentioned, and that is economic justice is social justice, is civil rights. Rosie Castro wanted me to speak at Our Lady of the Lake with the 50-year with the anniversary of the civil rights hearings. Yes, and because she recognizes that this is a civil rights issue, and that economic justice is social justice, we would be. I think we would be wrong if we would separate, as if that's not exactly what we're talking about. We're exactly talking about inclusion and creating inclusive systems, right? If you're not included in our economic system, then we're failing. If you're not included in our social system.
One more question or comment, and then we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Hi, I just heard one of the speakers say something about how economic justice is intertwined with social justice, and this is related to my question. And thank you for having this conference. I'm happy to be here. My name is Maylee Carolyn. I am owner of a consultancy called Engage Between. Can you hear me? All right. My name is Maylee Carolyn. I'm owner of a consultancy named Engage Between, and I'm always looking for incentives for people to invest in people. In my training work, I tell people that in organizations, people are your best technology, right? And again, always looking for ways to underscore the value of people. A lot of folks I experience feel and want to invest in that human potential. And when it comes to making decisions, this is not the decision that is made, unless it intertwines, like the moderator was speaking about, with that economic bottom line value, right? I'm looking for new or nuanced ways to help underscore the value of people in this whole inclusion process. What do you have to share? And even anyone in the audience as well.
It's fundamental to why we're doing this work, I think, because we know that we're talking about technology, about infrastructure, things like that, right? Engineering details. We're talking about investing in people. That is precisely what we're talking about. And the challenge of our time that I talked about a little earlier is just that. How do we, in the face of this technology and this opportunity that it offers, how do we become more human? How do we use the data panel was really talking about that. How do we analyze data, not just use cognitive computing and let it spit out an answer for us, but really be able to analyze that data and be analytical, right, and about it. So I think the very essence, if we haven't communicated that well about the digital divide, it is about investing in people. And that's actually how I talk about it, for example, when I'm training banks in closing the digital divide under the Community Reinvestment Act. They're going to be doing some real, financing of broadband infrastructure. They're going to support training programs and so forth. What they need to understand, and what we talk about very directly, is you're actually investing in people that have been underinvested in, right? So that sort of answers your question.
I'm just going to add something really quick. So I would say technology is a tool, right? And so some really cool things I've seen lately are the integration of virtual reality and augmented reality into training. And so I'm not a technical person, right? I don't necessarily know how to do that, but that's been interesting to me, because I think until you can actually have people stand in someone else's shoes and experience what they experience, they're not going to care, right? And I don't want to necessarily keep having students say their same stories and this is what it's happening and we don't have the money and we don't have the infrastructure. Like, that's not fair to those students or those populations to keep saying the same story and having to educate people over and over and over and find the data over and over. I think to some extent we have to be more creative in how we put people in other people's shoes. So I think when you look at, unconscious bias training, when you look at workplace harassment training, all these things are changing because people have become a little desensitized to all those issues, but they're important issues. And so I would say, make friends in the technology community with engineers, with developers, with software developers, with folks in computer science departments in schools, and say, hey, I'm trying to communicate this. How would you do it? Right? If somebody wasn't understanding it, how would you do it? And then see what that answer is, because I think a lot of times we think we have the answers, but we're not giving people an opportunity to help us get outside of our box a little bit. So that would be the only thing I would suggest.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks for inviting me, Amanda, Deanne, and Jordana. Have a wonderful afternoon.
to meet you. Oh, great. I'm with Education Service Center Region 20. Nice to know. Nice to know you.
Very topical issue.
Yes, no doubt.
Yeah, so definitely. So we have a microphone that you can use or that can be shared. That one's already on.
Because Jake will want to see.
I don't really need a microphone, I don't think. Right?
You do because they're casting live. It's a stream.
Jessica know that she doesn't have bias for everybody, so I told her probably best to let you guys all introduce.
Yes, he also is nice and fancy. He has words, notes.
Whatever. No, this is the agenda.
I just have pictures. Did people get up and present?
No. Boop boop. I'm Reve.
Nice to know you too. I've been to a couple of the ecosystem communities as of so I'm really familiar with it. Slides for any of you, but here's
Just him.
I have a slide.
I'm after you, Mona.
You first.
Well,
We checked it. It works. I see the thing like there's nothing you can see, so
I know, I'm going to get up too.
Oh, yeah.
Will they?
Are you going to sing?
are we all seeing?
No, I can't do that. You don't want
You don't
that.
have a dance, do you?
I might have a dance.
That's hilarious. What time do we start?
Start at 1, so we should might as well do it. We'll bump into the other ones, right? Okay.
Let's do 15. Let's do 15. You're in charge. You got the mic. Whatever you want to do. Tell me that. It'll go to my head.
And I'm like, I was on the other panel, so I jumped on the other panel because somebody was leaving. And then I'm like, anyway, so I was like presenting, and it was a mess. So I'm like, what's the question again for this panel?
Partnering public and private to purchase a design.
Yeah, that's kind of like,
First, gonna make it work.
yes, yeah, well, yes, we're just gonna, okay.
All right.
Jake, were you here all day? No, I just came in for the presentation.
Hi.
You're hiding from our camera.
Oh no. Do you want me to stand?
I was a rock star. You come in inside out.
Is sitting okay?
How about you?
Okay.
Just talk here this.
Equal access. Huh?
Oh, so you got my parking spot in the front, huh? Did I?
Okay.
I saw Jake.
No, I'm
Middle
okay.
name Jake right here.
You will scooch over to it?
Because if you start that, then I can just stand there.
Okay.
And then Jake stand, and then that might be easier.
Then I'll switch out with you guys.
Yes.
As you stand.
Right? Because there's a lot of us.
Yes, I do. Yeah, but I'm don't worry, I'm not like
Are we ready for a second? No, you're good. Do your thing. Connecting. Just say we'll start in 10 seconds. Okay, we're going to start in a few seconds here, folks. Teacher tricks. Were you a teacher before? And a trainer, so, whatever you need to corral. Learning. Exactly. They're getting it. And we should just pick this up and pass it whenever we want to talk, because you can't hear when it's right there.
so I'll just.
So I'll hold it. Okay. So, hi everyone. My name's Jess Elisa Raras. It's a long one, but it's on my label. So our panel is going to be educating and upskilling San Antonio using public and private partnerships. And our panelists are pretty great so far. So I'm going to let them do a brief intro each, because we are running a little behind on time. So, Munirek, do you want to go ahead and start us?
Okay, I could do
Just an intro, yeah.
Oh, I guess I can pass because I was in the panel before. Again, my name is Munira Jester, and I manage the Connect Home program with the San Antonio Housing Authority. So I have been lucky to be working on digital inclusion for 4 years right now. So it's just like my dream come true. Like everybody knows what digital inclusion is and trying to understand, and it's not an issue that look, people are like, digital what? Like, people are owning, and San Antonio is really on taking off in those terms. So I'm super happy to be here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Reve Schaefer. I'm from Education Service Center Region 20, Coordinator for Strategic Partnerships and Innovation, and I serve as the San Antonio STEM Council Chair and a co-lead on the STEM ecosystem.
Hi, Jake Lopez, Executive Consultant to Say STEMIC. We have several partnerships with Saha and Munhade, as well as with Reve and Region 20. And in addition, I work with a lot with workforce and career technology education.
Hello there, good afternoon. My name is Ray Fang, and I'm the Dean of Academic Success for Palo Alto College, responsible for the Professional and Technical Education Division, which includes a number of programs, including computer science and IT, hence our interest in the digital divide.
Let's kick off with Mooney. Can you tell us, oh, sorry, you good? She does have a presentation ready for us, so.
I know you, let me switch. This is just a real quick, because I know we kind of tried to the presentation before. So I just put those numbers there so we can share a little bit more what Saha does and who do we serve. And that's our community. The thing that I want to focus right there is the, well, there's a different one. That we provide housing and creating communities for our residents, not only through public housing, like, right, the communities that we have throughout the city. So San Antonio Housing Authority, we have over 70 public housing properties. So we're one of the largest housing property in the country. And the median income of our households is about $12,000 a year. So, and then 89% of our residents are single mothers with young kids at home. So you can see that our residents really need us to have this conversation, really need for us to collaborate with the different organizations to help them and use, and the Housing Authority use housing as a platform really to help them to become self-sufficient. So then, Jordana talked a little bit more about the stats. 1 in 6 households in San Antonio do not have a computer. 1 in 4 do not have internet access. And now we are the 17th worst connected city in the country. So a lot of the people we're talking about, the digital divide, are our residents. They're in our community. So I just want to take this, this time to say thank you for all the partners and everybody that's here and really trying to engage with us and help provide services in our community, because we couldn't, do anything without you, essentially. So I'm going to skip a lot of this, but that's the tracks. And again, we have different partners and different strategies. So as part of Connect Home, we know that providing literacy training, computers, and connectivity, it's digital inclusion. We got everything covered, providing the 3 legs of the stool for digital inclusion. But then we talk, what's next? So we have a lot of residents that are connected, a lot of residents that went through the training, and they have some digital skills. But then we're looking, okay, moving forward, what can we do for them to use those tools, those tools to further in their career path and their education? And I think that's where the rest of the panel are going to speak really on that they need the basic infrastructure, but it doesn't end there. Essentially, that's what I want to say. Like, once you have a computer and have the skills and the connectivity, there's still a lot that we need to do to make sure that people are fully digitally included. There's a Connect Home, but I want to just share, this is a picture of our team. We have some new team members and some have left us and to bigger and better opportunities. But I want to share, this is our digital ambassadors, and you might see some of them. So we have Mr. Marvin Limpkins over there. So he's a retired veteran. He is one of our residents, and he is a digital ambassador. He works tirelessly going to every community with our trainer to help provide training and tech support, because we should talk about that digital inclusion. Once you provide a computer and you have the skills, people need help with tech support. And that's always, if anybody does tech support and want to talk to me, please, I'd love to chat with you, because it's a huge need. And we have some more of our digital ambassadors there when you guys are checking in. There are residents that we provide extra training and extra service, and we marry the program as a workforce development. So our digital ambassadors, they are learning they have their own project plan. They go to the different sites and they help provide training. They provide tech support. They go through the refurbished computers. So we're really trying to use the ecosystem of digital inclusion and expand it one step further to see how can we include workforce development and education and all the other great stuff. I know I wanted to go through this presentation just real quick and just 2 more minutes to talk about Cassiano Homes. So Cassiano Homes is one of our largest property on the east side, the west side of San Antonio, and we have 499 units there. So some of our units there, those apartments, are 3, 4, 5-bedroom apartments. So it's a large multifamily property that, if you put on the map that Emily have provided to us, they're on the wrong side of the divide. So the San Antonio Housing Authority looked at, like, let's be creative. How can we innovate? That's what I remember, Jordan. How can we innovate in reaching low and moderate income residents in terms of providing broadband? So the Mozilla Foundation put out a challenge calling agencies to, let's be innovative how you connect people to the internet. So we're so lucky, and I brought that to our IT director. I was like, hey, we got to talk about this. So we got to jump in and got to figure it out. So our IT department, we was meeting, took us a year, talking about this. We decided to create the solar mesh network. It's essentially just Wi-Fi equipment powered by solar panels. That allows us to, bring those equipments to a property like Cassiano, which is blocks long. So this is our entire property. And then you see the green dots there, those are existing solar panels. And we're figuring out, like, once we have the solar panels and the poles, we can put Wi-Fi equipment, but we can also put security cameras, we can put lighting. So there's a lot you can do when you're being creative, or when you just put in lighting, you can put Wi-Fi equipment to help us expand the connectivity. So this is what essentially the solar pole kind of looks like. So it's the solar, and then the Wi-Fi equipment are attached to the boxes. And as part of this, the Mozilla Challenger we had to create an open source solution that was sustainable, and you could, and it was also like, we actually created a prototype that's on wheels, because we wanted, so like any property, we can actually put a pole and actually connect to the bandwidth and light up the community. So I'm going to push that. So our challenge right now is bandwidth. So we have the equipment. One solar pole cost us, I think it was like less than $2,000 to put together. And we purchased everything using Amazon. Everything. And less than $2,000. So it can be really affordable and sustainable, but our challenge is the bandwidth. So where do we get the connectivity so we can get the bandwidth and essentially beam out the connectivity throughout the neighborhood? So, again, partners, I keep asking, right, for people like, hey, if you have computers, if you have bandwidth, but that's really what it takes when we talk about digital inclusion, right? It's the partnerships. And so looking forward, I'm missing a slide, but so we entered this challenge. It was 90 organizations throughout the country that entered the challenge for the Mozilla. The total prize was $500,000, and there's 90 organizations. We're the only housing authority. We moved on to the final stage. There were 7 organizations that essentially presented the prototype, and we won 3rd place. So a couple months ago, we were able to say we won 3rd place, and we got $100,000 to help us create this solar mesh network. So what I'm telling you this is that, yeah, I just like, woo! Is that, this is what Deanne was talking about, next summit and what we want to see. I want to see how we're more of the creative ways that you guys in your organizations are already doing to bridge the digital divide. Like, I want to hear more about what other organizations, other city and other housing authorities are doing creatively to solve this problem. Right now, our creative solution is the Solar Mesh Network, and we are really looking for partners, organizations, school districts, nonprofits, church that do have bandwidth. And one strategy that we're looking at right now is called bandwidth sharing. It's a concept that if your organization have a building or have a connectivity close enough to our communities, if you don't use your Wi-Fi on the weekend or in the evenings, we can actually put equipment on top of our rooftops that we can capture some of your connectivity and beam it down. So if anybody wants to share bandwidth, come and talk to me. So it's just, again, it's just a creative solution to really help our residents be connected because they are the most affected by the digital divide. And then, so bandwidth donations. So I will stop here because I already talked too much, but thank you guys.
Jake, you have a slide too, right? Sorry. Okay, so a little bit more from Jake.
Good afternoon. My name is Jake Lopez, Executive Consultant to Civic, and I apologize, my slides are not as fancy as Munhade's, so I just have a lot of pictures on there, but I'll let you know. I guess I'm on the other side of the digital divide. I can't even work this. Okay. So what we want to do is try to help close the digital divide. As Munhade mentioned, they get these homes or these certain populations connectivity, they give them internet access, Wi-Fi, et cetera. Now what do we do? Well, at Systemic, what we want to do is help develop a workforce, and we have to start them young, getting them interested in education, the career paths, and the correct courses to take. So how do we do that? We do that with partnerships. We do that with corporate partnerships to help fund these programs, and we even partner with Saha, with Munhade, and some of their programs there to offer these programs to their students that live in these housing projects or housing components. Real quick, in the STEM pipeline, right now about 80% of the careers that are offered, regardless if it's middle skilled, whatever technology you need, there's going to be some type of STEM component. And if you notice, this upcoming year right now, freshmen, we have over 4 million freshmen in high schools right now as we speak. By the time they graduate, that graduating class, they're going to drop 30%, and that's a national average. How many of them are going to choose a STEM career path? Another 34% drop there. Then you're going to see how many students can't even pursue that college plan because they're not college ready, meaning they don't have the correct math courses, the correct science courses. They have to start at basic levels, and in order for them to graduate, it's going to take them 6 years or more. So they end up dropping out. Then out of that, you're down to, we started out at 4 million. We're down to 277,000 that choose a STEM major. And by the time they graduate, we're down to 5% out of the 4 million students that we had. So again, how do we curb that? We curb that by partnering with entities such as Saha and other corporate partnerships. So those workforce needs, a lot of the workforce that we grew up with, they were known as blue collar. Like my dad or my parents, they worked. They're actually doing some manufacturing, hands-on, and building. Well, those careers today have changed, and a lot of the students aren't aware of that because they're afraid that it's so much IT that they don't want to go to school for, but they're really called workforce needs. What this guy is doing here, he's programming that exact same machine to do the exact same job, except he's programming a computer to do it instead of him doing it by his hands. So the blue-collar jobs are now changing into gray-collar jobs. And that's what we want to prepare these students for by closing that digital divide. So as I mentioned, right now 80% of the middle-skilled workforce that does not even require a degree, just a high school diploma, need some kind of digital proficiency. In the next 5 years, those skills or those jobs are going to increase by almost 5%. Non-digital proficiency jobs are going to be decreasing over the next 5 years by almost 2%. So we want these students to be aware of these careers, and we want to prepare them for those careers. Now, you may ask yourself, I've heard of STEM different other ways. I've heard it with an extra M. I've traveled all over the nation, and I've implemented STEM programs everywhere. If you go to the Panhandle of Florida, they'll have an extra M for STEM, and that STEM stands for medical. If you go to Ohio, that extra M stands for manufacturing. So it really depends on where you are. I think we've all heard of STEAM. Up in New York, New Jersey is really big with the arts. But if you go to, Iowa, it's actually for agriculture. They're actually, like drones, they're actually programming tractors to do the crops now today. That's what they're doing. So all that to say that a lot of kids are intimidated by the STEM component, and what can I do? As I mentioned, all you need is STEM, S-T-E-M. You see it in cosmetology today. Look what they're doing. I mean, and I have a lot of experience in cosmetology, you can tell. They're doing it in culinary. There's a lot of STEM going on in those kitchens. So in every job you can think of, there's STEM, and we have to help these students understand that. And again, we do that by forging partnerships with other nonprofit entities, corporations, 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges, et cetera. And like I said, mine isn't as fancy as Moon so I apologize about that. And we'll turn it over. Thank you.
Well, it's not going to end well. So I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit of what he said earlier. You're losing students through dropout rates, but what are some of the ways that you're trying to keep them on Reveille? Like that's your kind of...
Yeah, absolutely. So what's really important about the message that Jake shared is that there are multiple on-ramps to a viable career right here in San Antonio. And so empowering parents and students with those multiple on-ramps is really important. We've come from, and maybe all of us in this room probably had the same messages from our parents that college is the way. You've got to go to college. You've got to go to college. And while that's a really, really, really important message, college right now may not be the answer for all students. So there are possibilities where students might have certification and be able to pay their way through their education at a 2-year or a 4-year institution. So it's really important to know what are the possible ways that I could earn the kind of education I need for the job I want to do. And part of that, the job I want to do part, is educating students and parents about what's available right here in San Antonio. The jobs that my husband and I do today were not jobs 2 years ago. So it's really important to understand what your own strengths are. So as students, how do students understand what they're passionate about, what they're really good at, and how that aligns with where they want to be when they grow up, so that they can connect potential career options to the life they'd like to lead and how they want to get there. The pathway part of that conversation is probably the hardest thing to articulate because it's different depending on what kind of job a student wants to do and what they have to get there.
I mean, I went to a magnet high school, and I feel like I was supposed to be a doctor. That didn't happen. But I think being able to afford that, like, variety, too. Like, sure, you might not like this, but like Jake said, there's culinary, there's agriculture, there's arts, so there's plenty of ways. Just being digitally connected could do that for you. And then to bring it back to Dr. Ray, or Professor Ray, you know, college might not be for everyone.
That is true.
But what are some of the ways Palo Alto is pursuing these partnerships with people that can help?
Yes, that's a very good question. I must say that, yes, indeed, it's true. College is not meant for everyone, and that's okay. So at Palo Alto, we recognize that. And my faculty and staff, they recognize that too. And we have a very strong partnership with the ISDs and the high schools in the form of early college high schools. So we serve about 10,000 students, of which 30% of them come from early college high schools. That's from the high schools, the ISDs, and dual credits. So that's a very significant amount of students from high and middle schools. Now, so what's the message that we try to get out to them? The message we try to get out to them is this: that it is all right for you not to go to college if you so choose not to. There are other noble ways here to be a useful citizen, and that is through the vocational trade or some of the STEM programs like agriculture, horticulture, which lies within my division, and cosmetology too, which also is a STEM subject. So that's what we try to tell the advisors at the high schools, and also we try to reach out to the parents to make it clear that, you know, if your children so choose not to go down the 4-year transfer route, that is okay. You know, choosing the vocational trades or the technical education for STEAM or STEM, that too is fine. And as an institution, we try to facilitate that by giving the students the option, by making accessibility. So we, as an institution, we've tried very hard to make sure that students have access to the resources that we offer. So in terms of learning, in terms of student success, in terms of employment and equity. So we have been recognized by the Aspen Institute based in Washington, D.C. as one of the top 10 community colleges in the whole of the United States of America. Doesn't that deserve applause? Thank you. Thank you so much. So under the leadership of our Chancellor, Mike Flores, and our President, Robert Garza, we are continuing to try to bridge those barriers that prevent our students from getting access to what they deserve, in other words, training and education. And one of that, too, is the digital divide over here. And we're trying to work in partnership, in tandem, not only with the early college high schools, but also with industry. Each of our program has got what we call an advisory committee that is made up of people from industry. And so companies, they populate the advisory committees, and their job is to take a look at our curriculum to make sure that, number one, it's up to date, it's cutting edge, it's relevant, and it suits the needs of the companies that we serve here in our local community. So they play a very important role. And they, too, recognize the need for training and certifications, like you mentioned earlier on. So certificates are becoming more important, in my experience, compared to what we were always keen on, and that is the associate's degree, which is equally important. And statistics show that if you have an AA, you're more likely to stay in employment longer compared to those who've only just got a GED. But as time has changed, and given the changes in technology and in the workforce, certification is becoming increasingly important and in demand compared to AA. And what's the benefit of certificates? Certificates are beneficial in that they take a shorter time for the students to achieve. So in a nutshell, many of the students that we serve, over 50%, they come from economically disadvantaged divide. So it's the same with the population that you serve in the housing authority. So we're in the same boat. We want to see what we can do to bridge that so that students get trained properly, professionally, and the wraparound services that we as an institution offer. Thank you.
Thank you. So when we talk about building partnerships, how do you make each group attractive to, you know, the Targets and the Microsofts of the world to be able to, I mean, are you going through foundations and connecting that way and grant writing, or is it, how do you activate that at all?
Grants play a very important role. And that's what our president is focusing on now, raising funds. And all the funds that we do, that we get, grants that we apply for, go towards the investment in education and training for our students, as well as the equipment. So I think in terms of working with partners, the foundations to which we approach as well, strategically, intentionally, I think the important thing that we've learned so far is creating awareness and being intentional in your approach. So it can't be a scattergun approach or something that is speculative, you know, but it has to be intentional. So creating the awareness of this digital divide, for example, is key to connecting them with the right people who want to put their money where their mouth is, who also then therefore see that there is a need to invest. So what we're talking is about relationships that are long-term, and that takes time, and then investment, which requires a certain amount of forethought and strategic planning for those who want to give. They need to know, too, that there is a need, and that if they put the money there, that goes to the long-term investment of our local community, which is a win-win for the common good.
I wanted to add a little something to that because I think a critical point, and in San Antonio we're learning this across the nation now that we're part of a national network of STEM ecosystems, is that it's the relationships in San Antonio that are different from other communities that make us really unique in how we work together. So the fact that we all have access to one another, the fact that a chamber would be sitting across the table from an ISD, and an ISD would be sitting across the table from an industry member, that is a really special and unique relationship in San Antonio. So that's one of the things that we're learning, is that we're a little farther ahead, and Jake did a lot of that research too in the ecosystem, where we are far ahead and we are closely connected, so having long sustainable relationships is really, really critical. But the other thing I think we can always lift up in this community is our ability to collaborate and cooperate and to be less competitive. So we've talked about it every panel. I think we've had 12 people up here. and all 12 people have said how they've leveraged resources or are calling to action to leverage those resources. So when we do what we do and we live in our strength and we bring our strength to the table across partners, we find a way to use those collectively to do more for more people. And so I think that's a critical thing. Coming from a place of yes in this community is really consistent. It's not always healthy, but it's pretty consistent in this community. So when we come from a place of yes, we are more likely to have resources to leverage to raise up some best practices and scale out and up.
I guess on that, I would just put a plug in for the Digital Inclusion Alliance, because I think when we talk about partnership and collaboration, I think we all want to partner, we all want to work together, but sometimes I feel like we don't have the framework. So I feel like creating the framework and creating, I don't know, the program model, the logic model that will allow for different organizations to step in at different times. So as a housing authority, we're really good at providing housing, right? So as Connect Home, we're doing the Wi-Fi and connecting people and working with T-Mobile and all the different partners to help on that end. But when it comes to workforce development, we have our programs, but as Connect Home, I'm going to talk just about my program. As Connect Home, I don't have the expertise or the resources to do workforce development. So that's like when partnerships with Goodwill was so essential, because that's what they do. They're workforce development, and they have the track record, and they have all, everything that backs up. So for me, it was really super helpful to connect with Angelique and the Goodwill and say, like, hey, how can we expand digital literacy and create, remember the tracks I was showing you, workforce development and entrepreneurship. I don't have to do that part. I have a partner that we can work together and apply for grants together and create this framework that it's a pipeline, and we can refer some people to go to Goodwill and get the nurse assistant certification and administrative assistant. So again, what they do with the technology and the digital divide will provide the tools, but I think the partnership is really going to provide the impact that we're looking for. Jake?
I guess I have to say something now. So the way we go about partnerships is through foundations and grant writing. And like Dr. Fang said, there's data that you need. You can't just say, hey, we want to offer something cool for the kids. You have to have specific data. So for example, with our program, we target students that are in lower socioeconomic situations. We don't exclude any students, but about 85% of our students are designated as lower socioeconomic. In addition to a lot of the STEM fields, they tend to be very male-dominated. So we have a minimum of 50% female participation in all of our programs. And because of some of that data that we can track, more corporations are interested in partnering with us. So what we don't have is we don't have the students. So for example, in the summers, a lot of students, my kids, for example, I can afford to pay for them to go to a summer camp. A lot of Moonhaday's kids at their housing units do not have that availability or the resources to do that. So we go out and offer those summer camps, those STEM camps for them by partnering with a corporate entity who can fund it, and then partnering with SAHA to get the students to participate in the program.
That's awesome. You mentioned the 50% minimum. I mean, is it harder to attract that audience, or where are you going to meet them?
Yes, initially, and I think it really starts in elementary. For whatever reason, my daughter is very good. She's done engineering camp. She's very good at it, but then she says she doesn't like it. I think it's maybe kind of maybe bully mentality of the boys network. So what we've done to overcome that is we've actually had all girl camps, probably in about 5th or 6th grade. And then by the time they get to 7th grade, we then immerse them with the males. And by that time, they've built enough confidence to shrug the males off. And to be honest, I've seen a lot of these projects. The female stuff is actually cooler than the guy stuff, to be honest.
I think you hit a really important point there, confidence. I mean, when you're trying to bridge that digital divide and provide these things to people, you're not just trying to make them know how to log on, but be confident that they'll be able to go from plan A to B to C, and they'll find these things on their own. Sorry, go ahead.
I think that's a very good point you make. What we're trying to teach them is confidence, right? So in our student population in Palo Alto, 60% of them are girls, so which is a good thing. The guys, you're letting the side down, but that's okay. But when we teach skills, like you say, in terms of confidence and so on, what we're also doing is teaching them the soft skills that many of us employers are looking for. So that includes civility, how you're civil towards those that you meet, teamwork. So when you are in a team, they are both, male, females, and how do you get along? How should you treat? You're teaching them respect. So these are the sort of, when you say confidence, implicitly you're also talking about skills, social skills, and you're also talking about things like values. What are the values that you should have as an individual, as a student, as a member of society, or the workforce that you choose to go into, the industry that you choose to go into, and the company that's going to employ you and going to engage you, and the kind of a contribution that you're going to make. So, what about that? And also leadership skills. So I think those are very important things to consider for educators when we try to bridge the digital divide, and actually what it also means, looking beyond just the infrastructural barriers that might be there, and how we try to bridge that, what we bring to the table. These are all the sort of other things that we should be thinking about. That's the point I want to make.
So we're kind of wrapping up here. Any questions for the folks on partnerships they've made or how to keep a healthy partnership? Any other questions, period? You guys nailed it. Yeah. Or we need a coffee break, but yeah. Well, thank you for being here with us, and you can find them all at the happy hour after. Thanks, guys.
turn it over to her. Come forward so that the panelists won't be lonely. Bring your coffee, stay awake, do a few jumping jacks.
Trip on my own purse. And I think I'll give him a minute. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Tricia Swenison, and I'm the Associate Editor at the Business Journal. With us today, we have Gabriel Garcia, the Senior Counsel for CPS Energy, and a board member of the National Association of Telecommunications Officers and Advisors. We have Clarissa Ramon. She's the Community Impact Manager for Google Fiber. We have Michael Kennedy, the Government Account Manager with T-Mobile. And we have Laura Cabanilla. She's the Vice President for Community Development with Wells Fargo. Excuse me. So our topic today is the future of digital inclusion, from home-based broadband access to making lasting change. And we want to have a discussion today about community impact, civic engagement, and last-mile solutions for shoring up the digital divide. So I'd like to start actually with Gabriel, if you don't mind. Could you explain to us the background of the issue and why we are where we are as a city?
So let me. So we are where we are because in order to have broadband connectivity, you have to have infrastructure. And so it is really the nature of the infrastructure that determines the amount of connectivity that you have in your city. I prepared a few slides in order to provide kind of a strategy of how how to analyze a situation for any city as to how can a city move forward? What is the role of the city in trying to bridge the digital divide? I think I'm going to stand up because I can't see the slides. So there's some fundamental questions that one wants to ask in terms of this issue. The first one is infrastructure, related to infrastructure. Has the private sector deployed fiber infrastructure in the community? Well, the answer in San Antonio is yes. In fact, we have a panelist on this panel who is with one of those companies. The next question is capacity. Do local communications networks have adequate broadband capacity? And that is an issue of how much is the broadband, how fast. And again, in San Antonio, we do have companies that provide pretty robust broadband. The next question is usage. What is the broadband adoption usage profile of the community? Essentially, is your community using broadband services? And here's where you start getting into the digital divide issue, because certain low-income neighborhoods are not going to, essentially you'll find that there's much lower usage than in other neighborhoods. So that's an important kind of question in terms of understanding the needs of the community. The next one is, well, so what is the role of the local government? And so in order to address that, you have to ask, what is the appropriate government role in expanding broadband access? And it's really identifying what the gaps are. What are those neighborhoods where there is not robust usage? And then that's where you really get into what we're here for, digital inclusion, which includes trying to expand network coverage, digital literacy, and then affordable access. And one thing to point out, I think we've heard it here before already, that the goal for the community with regards to broadband, it's not the technology in itself, but really it's just a means to an end. And there's been plenty of discussion this morning with regards to that. So this diagram kind of sets out everything that I said already. So any given community, in terms of developing a community strategy, the first thing they're going to determine is, do we have infrastructure? If you have partial infrastructure, then that needs to be expanded. If you have no infrastructure, then it needs to be built. That right there will help any local government in determining the size of the problem, if you will. And then from there, everything kind of flows from there. What role, what issues should a government play in terms of digital inclusion programs? Well, the first thing that they need to do is to understand how broadband is being used in the community, and the way to do that is to do an assessment. And then once you know that, then you know where your target audience is. And then you use your programs, some of which already exist with local governments or with nonprofits, to target those areas, those communities. And you integrate that into economic development, as some other speakers have discussed. So that's kind of the strategy for any local government in terms of trying to address what is the role of a local government in digital inclusion.
Okay, so with that as our background, could each of our panelists please tell us your role in the Digital Inclusion Alliance and what your organization's goals are?
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Clarissa Ramon, and I am a Community Impact Manager for Google Fiber here in San Antonio. How many of you have heard of Google Fiber? All right, cool, okay. I always like to ask that question. And the first question I usually get after I say that is like, well, when are you coming to my neighborhood? So I lead external affairs for fiber here in San Antonio. I work closely with the Alliance, or have worked closely with the Alliance in the past. And I also lead our local field sales strategy. And so I think later on in this discussion we'll get to some of those learnings and reactions we get from different areas in terms of our product offering and the reactions to a gig, the appetite for a gig. But pertaining to this question, Google Fiber officially announced it was coming to San Antonio in 2015. We had an event, we were very excited, and it became a race to get to as many residents as we could in San Antonio with a standalone home fiber product. Since then, we've experienced a pretty fair amount of challenges, both externally with the disruptive nature of our business. We are physically building a standalone fiber network. We don't use the city's fiber. We don't partner with other providers. And so there was a lot of surprise from the community when it came to seeing our construction crews in their neighborhoods and not necessarily understanding or tying our brand to the very real disruption they were feeling. And we also had a lot of internal changes. When I first joined the team, it was all about scale. We were in conversations with dozens and dozens of cities across the country. And now we've really decided to pivot and focus on a few select markets, San Antonio being one of them. And because the markets that we serve are also different, our strategy with regards to digital inclusion has also varied. We have different product offerings in different markets. We've experimented with different affordable product offerings, from providing free gigabit service to housing authorities in certain markets, to launching more affordable, lower tier products. And we've taken all those learnings and we're kind of continuing to learn those lessons, share best practices out, and see how we can really show up and be a good partner to the communities in the markets that we serve. So when it came to San Antonio, I would say that San Antonio was a city with a lot of really robust digital inclusion actors, practitioners, specifically the library, certain nonprofits that were understood that this work was valuable, but hadn't really connected in a way that you see today through this alliance. And so I'd like to think that we were a part of the development of the alliance and that we really look to communities to inform us of the strategy locally. And it's really important for us to show up as a partner and listen to other folks and just really provide resources where we can. So we leverage dollars. I act as a funder in some spaces, and other times it's providing best practices or sharing learnings from what's worked in other markets. So we're really here to listen and to learn and to usually complement the work that's already happening. So in just the past 2 years since the Alliance has developed, it's been really amazing to see the tremendous amount of growth, all the conversations, and the formulation of what I think will be a very, very strong digital inclusion plan. And so I'll stop there to give Michael a chance to chat, but that's essentially kind of in a nutshell what the role we've played so far in the Alliance to date.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Michael Kennedy. I'm a government account manager with T-Mobile, and my primary role is to support all of our public sector and government customers, cities, counties, municipalities, school districts, in South Texas. And so San Antonio is my hometown, and have a lot of passion around helping with the initiative of bridging the digital divide. Very, very hot topic. So, really focusing a lot of our attention in some of the key areas in the education space, providing some grant programs to some of the school districts for student connectivity initiatives is a really big priority of ours, as well as participating in programs like Connect Home to provide connectivity for local housing authorities and so on. So just, really excited about, really what the connectivity age is bringing to the forefront, and bridging that digital divide is such a hot topic at this point, where mobile communication and wireless technology is becoming a big part of that. So it's really exciting to be part of this, and thank y'all for having us.
I have been an informal advisor to the Alliance and continue to do that.
Short and sweet.
There you go.
I like it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Cabanella. I'm Vice President of Community Relations and the Community Development Officer for Wells Fargo here in Central Texas. And because of the work that a lot of partners have been working on these last few years, in particular, with Leela Powell, she's now with Liz San Antonio a few years ago. Her and I had a couple of different conversations about the city's priorities and where the city was focusing on. And we know for a lot of our low to moderate income areas and households, there's a lot of barriers that individuals have in order to be successful, right? You know, they're always going to be looking for a job, but what opportunities do they have? There's transportation issues, there's childcare issues, and now you're bringing in the mix of internet and broadband. You see internet as an issue for education now in the lower grade levels. Kindergarten, first grade, they're now using apps to play games. And so when you talk about how to take this into the neighborhoods and how to allow our public housing properties, similar to what Mooney was presenting earlier, and give them an equal opportunity to have that education level, that's where we came in as a bank. You know, my job is to help understand the needs of the community, to determine, along with elected officials, partners such as these individuals here and you guys in the audience, what are the needs? And so we started digging a little bit and found that digital inclusion is going to be a need in the future. We see that transitioning in the bank where a lot more people, who uses online banking, by the way? Almost everyone in this room. Who uses app banking, right? So imagine if you don't have a phone and you can't bank with your phone, you can't do your remote deposits, you can't transfer funds, you can't pay your bills. So if you don't have that type of access at home growing up, there's a lot of unbanked customers that are out there. There's still individuals that are saving their dollars and putting it under the pillow, under the mattress, putting it in jars. So how do we go out there and talk to them a little bit more about the safeguard of having a bank, the safeguard of saying, you know, we want to partner with you and help you financially. And so that's how we got invested in this partnership. And it was more of understanding the needs, what the city and the priorities were from a workforce development aspect. Not a job creation, but a workforce development, right? Because a lot of times now, more jobs are you have to go online and submit an application. No longer are you going to be seeing a lot of paper applications. So in partnering with the San Antonio Housing Authority, that's how we got into the digital inclusion conversation and provided that initial grant for us to step into the conversation in 2016 for the amount of $75,000 for Connect Home to pilot, woohoo, I see Mooney in the back, me too, I'm the same way, to see how we can help make a difference, not only from an education standpoint, but providing access. If they go through the program and there's peer-to-peer learning, then they receive some sort of device to take home and go ahead and connect, or the opportunity to come up with what they presented in California as a mobile test to try and provide Wi-Fi connectivity. For us, it's trying to stay relevant in the community, with community needs, and so we're going to continue that conversation and see in the future how we can continue to support digital inclusion.
So, Laura, because you brought it up, I'd like for the panelists, can you tell us why the city needs a digital inclusion plan as part of their economic development plan? How do those two things work together?
I'll go first. Well, as I indicated on this diagram over here, the significance of the city is very important because the city can play a role that a lot of nonprofits cannot. And also because it's really important, and I think it's becoming even more important, to integrate digital inclusion with economic development for a lot of the reasons that you're hearing in this panel and that you've heard already earlier in the day. That is the key role that a local government can play that it's very difficult for other players in the community to play. The other thing is that the city is also an entity that can bring together all of those profit and nonprofit organizations that are doing something in this space, because there's a lot of them. Bring them together so that you can create alliances, you can cooperate, You can find answers to some of the questions that I mentioned earlier. That's why it's so important for the local government to develop a digital inclusion. It's not for the purpose or for the sake of just saying you have a plan. It's about integrating it with economic development so that your citizens have economic opportunities based on access to technology. Again, the infrastructure and the technology is a means to an end. That end could be education, that end could be a job, that end could be coding, that end could be being an entrepreneur, etc. That's what the digital inclusion plan and integrating with economic development affords a city.
So I'll say a couple of things. First of all, I think it's helpful in that as a new provider to the market, you're coming into a community that you might have some data about, and we know what the data says about San Antonio. We know that the digital divide here is significant, and it was actually, not only is San Antonio the biggest market that fiber's committed to, it also had the greatest digital divide. So we know that the plan that is developed by local stakeholders will reflect that appropriately and then sort of set a baseline for us to work from. And so I think it's important to have that guidance from not only the city but local stakeholders to let us know where can we have the most impact. If we have a finite amount of resources, whether that's through a product investment or through dollars, I want to make sure that we're making the most of that investment and that we're putting it where it counts and where we can help move the needle. And so I think we've received a lot of that guidance from local organizations. We talk with the city a lot. We've talked to partners. We work closely with CPS and SAWS when it comes to our deployment. But at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are helping to move the needle forward and not necessarily does it make sense sort of going rogue, right, with what we might think is, and it might be more of a cookie cutter solution that might not appropriately reflect the needs of San Antonio. So I think a plan is one of the many tools in a toolkit that a local community can have, and it's really important, and I think we're getting there. And just to set some context, when we launched in Austin, Texas was the second or third market that fiber committed to. The city of Austin has an Office of Digital Inclusion. There are full-time digital inclusion program managers. There's a city-funded fund for this work. And so this work was able to sort of start at a different place. And I'm not saying that they're better or we were worse, but different cities have come at this from a different place. Other cities like Kansas City's developed digital inclusion coalitions, and so those really help drive and direct us in a way that, again, San Antonio has been very helpful, but I think the more guidelines that you can provide with regards to this investment, the better.
Just one more point to add to, the plan also helps provide guidance for or removing barriers of entry for new providers or innovation to take place. So there's a lot of things that come into play when trying to integrate new technologies and provide better bandwidth or capabilities as it relates to connectivity. And so permitting and some of those things can sometimes create significant delays. So partnership with the city, I think, is a very important piece of that, and having that plan put together to make the process a little bit more streamlined and easier to navigate so that it can bring those resources to the community.
And I'll just plus one that because the ability to innovate is really, really important, especially as a new entrant. And the city of San Antonio has been incredibly helpful and flexible in allowing us to stretch in different directions. And we've been able to remain committed to San Antonio and reach subscribers, customers, residents because of that flexibility. So I appreciate that you brought that up.
Thank you. I think I just wanted to add to what Clarissa said right now in terms of partnerships. Having you guys here attend and continue the conversation, Jordana and your team, is very important because I'm sure, Michael and Clarissa, you see from an enterprise-wide standpoint, there's conversations of what happens in other markets. And this may not be top of mind in a lot of different cities, but like a city of Austin or Kansas City, it is for them. And so I was in a chamber meeting a couple of months ago when the city manager presented the fiscal budget, and a question came up. What about digital inclusion? What about access to broadband? That's not something that is in the budget. Is that something you're going to come up with? If individuals are not keyed into this information and they're not listening and having those conversations in some of these key meetings, it may not come up. And so the more people that talk to their council members, talk to the city, and the more partnerships that we have. I'm taking off my Wells Fargo hat, by the way. I'm putting on my Southside First chair hat. To have these type of conversations with key partners is important, because in the area for the Southside First, that's south of Highway 90. There's a lot of need in that area, and you go into certain zip codes, the unemployment rate is high. It's 14%, 16%, right? Whereas the overall city unemployment rate is what, 3.5, somewhere around that benchmark. And so there's big pockets of need in different parts of the city. So you still need to continue that advocacy work. And so I applaud you guys for being here today and continue this conversation. From the bank standpoint, we want to support that. And obviously from a CRA standpoint, you got a lot of other banks that want to support it as well.
So y'all have led perfectly into my next question, which I see the Digital Inclusion Alliance as part of the solution, but what other things can the city do to continue moving us forward? Where do we need to put our efforts to close the digital divide?
I'll go first. Okay, well, it's already been said. It has to be in the budget. If it's not in the budget, it doesn't exist. That's really where the rubber meets the road. So it doesn't exist in San Antonio city budget today. That means there is no digital inclusion plan for the city. So where do we go? You go and talk to elected officials to make sure that next year and the year after that, there is an Office of Digital Inclusion, that there are programs that are thoughtful about how to make that office meet the needs of the city, and that this area is in the budget. That's really the bottom line. I mean, that's really the bottom line. You have to convince those that have the power of the purse that this is important and that it is a good investment for the city.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I would say the ability to really be flexible and open-minded when it comes to last mile deployment efforts. So I mentioned we committed in 2015, and the methods of our deployment were what had worked for us in other cities. And we learned very quickly in San Antonio that certain pieces of that plan were not the best strategy. And so we took that internally, we did a lot of thinking, we did a lot of research, and came back to the table with the city and said, there's a method of deployment called microtrenching. It is a technique that's used in other dense markets, and it basically is way less disruptive, it's cost effective, and it allows us to get in and out of neighborhoods much more quickly. And the city was like, let's do our research, let's get together and talk about this. They gave us permission to do a pilot in November of last year, and the pilot went really well, and then we were given permission by the city council to scale that out. That sort of flexibility and open-mindedness was really, really critical to the fact that I mentioned again that we're still here. It allowed us to ramp up our deployment efforts, start to provide service to residents, and essentially be another competitive provider. You know, one of the original motivations for getting into this business was that as a country, we pay a lot for broadband access, high-speed access, and in many markets there is really a lack of competition, and one is directly related to the other. And so in every market that fiber has launched in, even before we provide service, we've seen competitors improve speeds and lower prices. So we know that there's an immediate value add to encouraging competition and being open to new entrants to the market. And so I'd say that that sort of attitude is really, really good for consumers at the end of the day. And so I really can't stress that enough, right? Where being open to, and I'm sure Michael has some more thoughts on last mile deployment and the flexibility there, but it has been something that I can say over the past year, we've seen the real impact and felt the real impact of that flexibility.
So just a couple of points. So one, to continue to think creatively, to Clarissa's point, and outside of the box to attack the problem. And I think part of that also goes back to Gabe's point, is having a dedicated team that is there to do that, and having the budget for that team, I think is a big challenge. And it's just trying to tie all of those things together, being innovative and trying to focus on the problem of the digital divide and where it's going to impact the most of the community, or the greater part of the community, is really important in that piece. So,
let me make one more point before I pass. The city is investing in technology. For example, the library. There is great connectivity in the library. The point I was trying to make is that with regards to digital inclusion, by not having that as part of a city line item, it means that the nonprofit world is meeting that need in the community. So it's a decentralized model as opposed to a centralized model that could be.
And that's a great point, because there's a lot of partners that are working on this, right? You have UTSA stepping up with IT, SA Works and San Antonio Economic Development Foundation looking to do some partnerships. You have Port Authority working on it. So you have a lot of different folks that are working in different pockets. But I think to Gabe's point, you need somebody there on the top to help manage and maneuver and try and determine where the next steps are. And so I think we're there. I think people at the city understand that and they see, and there may be different individuals and different departments that are taking lead on different projects, but you don't have a single point of contact is probably the question. So to keep this conversation alive for next year, that may be something to do perhaps before the budget session as an opportunity to continue to advocate for digital inclusion.
So while we, work toward that and we look toward the future, can you tell us a little bit about some projects or some successes within your organizations that you feel are sort of fueling that momentum and at least keeping us on the path to digital inclusion?
So at CPS Energy, we have been working for the better of 2 years now with the wireless industry very carefully and thoughtfully in terms of developing standards for small cell equipment to be installed on our poles. In fact, CPS Energy is leading the industry in terms of developing such standards. We're developing best practices that have already been adopted by other utilities. The significance of this work is that when it comes to the deployment of next generation technologies like 5G, they're going to need to use utility poles. It's not just access to the poles for the small cell equipment, they also need fiber backhaul. All of these small cells require fiber to get back to the company's network. All of these issues fall under pole attachments. And it's a topic that's kind of boring, but very, very important in terms of deploying infrastructure. So in the last 2 years, CPS Energy has developed a new set of standards. We have now pole attachment standards, and they're available on our website to address both wire and wireline installations. So in effect, CPS Energy and the city, we are ready for the deployment of small cells in our community.
So we officially signed up our first San Antonio resident in November of 2017. So we're approaching our first year anniversary, And that is significant in a lot of different ways. I think there was a lot of anticipation about where we would go, who we would serve, what our product mix would look like. In San Antonio, we experimented with a single SKU product. So right now in San Antonio, for certain residents are eligible to sign up for a $55 a month product, standalone for 1 gig of service, 1,000 megabits up and down. And that provided a lot of learnings for the business, and it's been a very, very successful product. We've seen a lot of really good reception to that. And I bring that up because it allows us to continue to build and invest in San Antonio. So when it comes to digital inclusion, I really do believe that our best investments and partnerships are right in front of us. They're ahead of us. We needed to do some work to prove our business model internally, and then also just prove to the city that yes, we can do this, right? We can be less disruptive, we can get in and out of neighborhoods, the road won't stay bumpy forever, and I think that we're there. And so in addition to that, I think being part of the Alliance, part of these conversations, and again, funding projects like Connect Home, SA Youth Co-Jam, organizations that are really helping to cultivate that digital inclusion ecosystem are also important to this work. And so this has become a very interesting role because on one hand, I'm very focused on our short-term deliverables, and that's getting to as many neighborhoods in San Antonio as possible. But in the long term, we know that this issue is not going to be solved overnight, right? So we need to make these investments that maybe we're not going to feel in the short term, but connecting the students that have been referenced to broadband at home, to providing laptops, to making the case for digital inclusion as an economic development issue. All of these conversations are happening in real time, and they're conversations that we participated in. So that is where we are right now, and I'm just really, really excited about 2019. 2018 is almost over, goodness. But 2019 in the terms that like I feel really good about where we are as a business and our ability to scale in San Antonio.
So, as you know, T-Mobile, I mean, we operate nationwide. I'm going to bring things back here to hometown San Antonio as it relates to impact to digital divide. So we've worked hand in hand with a lot of organizations across the city to provide connectivity to economically disadvantaged families and students. Primarily, we've worked with San Antonio Housing Authority as an official Connect Home partner at the national level to help them with connectivity for some of their folks through the program that they have to provide digital literacy. So we're excited to be a partnership in that. We've also partnered with several district organizations throughout San Antonio to provide connected devices to students through a grant program that T-Mobile has that helps subsidize equipment cost and provide low-cost broadband unlimited data connectivity to students that are economically disadvantaged that have no connectivity at home. So in addition to Gabe's point, I mean, 5G is a hot topic in the wireless world right now. You know, as we start to look to the future and what connectivity is going to do to help bridge everybody's lifestyle to how they like to communicate and travel and do all of the things that they do day to day, what that technology and communication is going to help them do. 5G is going to be a very integral part of that. But I think what an important point to make now as it relates to digital inclusion and just broadband access is that the connectivity through a wireless network now as it stands is more than adequate as it relates back to the bandwidth and capabilities you know, that most consumers would need to access digital content. And so I think one important thing that we try to do a better job at is the education to, you know, consumers as to what available resources are currently available. You know, and yes, 5G is going to be great when it's here, but the reality is that what we're needing to do is connect to the resources we have today and the available resources are out there. We just need to be able to communicate that to our consumers. So.
Thanks. And just to talk about banking in general and banking for Wells Fargo, we continue to see and want to help serve our customers, whether they go in the branches or whether they visit us online, through their tablets, through their phones. And so virtual channels is going to be a big investment for us and will continue to be a big investment for us. And to also provide that one-on-one assistance to our customers in the branches, you know, for students and for those that are older. A lot of times they got used to their banker and they want to go in, but they're not used to looking on their phone or developing an app or accessing an app to do online banking. So, you know, number one, we want to make sure our customers are financially sound and successful. And number two, for our customers and our community, we want to make sure that we're investing in the right projects. You know, so looking, again, with Connect Home, talking to Project Quest. They have an IT workforce program that they've developed, and we've invested in that so they can continue to serve the community. Looking at San Antonio ISD, we're providing grants to them to help support innovative grants to their teachers at the school district level. You know, we were out at a few schools earlier this school year giving out those mini grants, and they were just to purchase tablets so they can access some technology to take into the classroom. Simple as that. You know, talking to the San Antonio Economic Development Foundation and looking at their overall strategy for technology and how that correlates to our local universities, and then transitioning into our high pockets of transition for Port San Antonio or Brooks. You know, how can we continue to support those programs that the city has invested in? So for us, it's being and staying connected to what the needs are and trying to look ahead and strategize along with partners as to what they think is needed. So relationships is big for us. If we can continue those relationships and have those conversations as to what your needs are, that'll better help us serve our community.
So in looking at the future, and a couple of you have mentioned 5G, what role do you see that playing in the future for bridging the digital divide?
So unfortunately, I don't think that 5G is going to address the issue of digital divide, and it might actually make it worse. And let me explain. But before that, let me try to explain what 5G is. 5G is a set of two standards that have not been issued yet. The first standard is a fixed wireless standard, which is to be released in 2019. And that is in order to have a true wireless broadband connection from a fixed point like a pole into a home. That's the first part of the standard. The second part of the standard, which is to be released in 2020, is the ability for a broadband, a heavy use broadband application to coexist with a very low use intermittent type of application, such as a sensor. The significance of this is that once you have both of those standards in place after 2020, now this wireless network will allow for the Internet of Things to really expand. That's what 5G is about, okay? Now, with regards to what role will it play in terms of meeting the digital divide, let's go back to fundamentals. One of the basic fundamentals of deploying networks is that in this country, there is no law that requires an ISP or a wireless provider to deploy their infrastructure throughout an entire community. They're going to deploy it where the market dictates, essentially where you have demand and you have subscribers that can afford the service. That means that based on market functions, there's not going to be any incentive for any firms, private firms, to deploy network in low-income neighborhoods. And that is why I say that it's likely that 5G is only going to make the problem worse. So therefore, that's going to leave it up to the wireless providers working with local organizations, as Michael explained already, in order to meet that digital divide. But that's a voluntary activity. They are not required by law to do so. And the other thing to understand about these 5G frequencies is that they don't travel very far. They will go essentially from the pole, depending on the particular frequency that's being used, maybe a couple of blocks, from that point. So even if the equipment, if the small cells are deployed close to a low-income neighborhood, that signal is not going to bleed into the low-income neighborhood. So that's what 5G is. I hope it's demystified a little bit, and we'll see how the deployments go. But those standards have not been released yet. So there is no 5G yet. Some providers have deployed or are deploying kind of proprietary 5G standards, but that's not what 5G is in the industry.
So we are focused first and foremost only right now on the fiber network. And as you mentioned earlier, you need fiber, you need the backhaul to provide the 5G service. So whether that comes from the private sector or that's public fiber, that's all to be determined. The question of wireless has been something that is in this category. I would put it in the category of innovation for Google Fiber. A couple of years ago, we acquired a small company in San Francisco called WebPass. And WebPass is an internet service provider that basically, they created a way to install nodes on different apartment buildings in the city of San Francisco, and then essentially create a wireless mesh network. So it's cost effective and it helps service a lot of residents very quickly. Now, whether or not that's a project that will be scaled out to other markets is TBD, but we don't necessarily see these two forms of reaching the customer as they're not conflicting, right? They're complementary. You need one to provide the other. So while 5G is not necessarily like in our current business model, we know it's in the air, right? There's this, we're, I guess to take a step back, the moment in time that we're living in is policy-wise, 5G, potential infrastructure bill, how do these things all fit together? What role does the private sector have to play? So it is a question that we are thinking about, and TBD on whether that wireless piece of our business model continues to get scaled out. But when it comes to the fiber, this is a long-term investment. And I would say in a lot of the conversations I have with residents, I presented a lot of homeowners associations, for example, and I would jump right into this is the speed, blah, 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 and we're gonna come in and we're gonna do this, and then people would be there'd be one person in the back that would be well, so what are you? Fiber? Why? And I'm oh, okay. Let's start there. And one of the bigger questions I get was why fiber? Why are you investing in this? Isn't there going to be something else that's coming out right behind you that's going to be the next big thing? And then by the time you've done with fiber, you're going to be coming back with something else? And my response was no. Actually, fiber is it. This is what we need to invest in to future-proof a community and prepare them for the things that come after that. So whether that's wireless or other competitors, and small cell technology is coming, it's here. And how that will scale out, who that will impact I think is all currently under consideration. So we're watching that conversation closely, and I think that there's an opportunity there for partnership. I don't necessarily see it as a competition.
So Gabe did a great job of kind of bringing all that, to an understanding on 5G. So there's a lot of things that are going on from a technological perspective, spectrum's perspective, millimeter wave perspective. There's a lot of new changes that are going to take place, but how much they will impact or affect the average consumer is not what everybody thinks it's going to be. Yes, it's going to provide better capacity, faster speeds, but it's more about the efficiency of the network. And ultimately, that efficiency is going to tie back to Gabe's point, the Internet of Things and the sensors and things that are going to be coming about. You hear a lot of talk about smart home, connected home. That is really what is going to be impacted, the greatest by the 5G development and the push for 5G technology. Now, that being said, as a wireless provider, our strategy is to have two networks coexisting, 4G LTE in addition to 5G technologies, so that, again, they can impact specific things for specific customers. But I think one thing that 5G will do is it is going to bring greater competition. There's been some discussion around some of the other broadband providers in San Antonio, and there being a limited number of providers. 5G is going to open up that marketplace to provide more options for the average consumer, which in turn will ultimately bring down the cost. And that's exciting when you think about having a wireless provider like T-Mobile to be able to come into your home and provide you an unlimited data connection, for a much more cost-effective price than what you would see with someone like a Spectrum, as an example. So again, I think there's a lot of really exciting things that are going to come from the 5G transition, but bringing it back to the digital divide and what's really important to connecting, families and the economically disadvantaged. There's a ton of connectivity options available, and it's really about the education of what's going to impact those individuals right now.
Let me make a couple of points in response to some of the comments that were made. The first thing is I want to dispel the myth that wireless networks are wireless. Wireless network is 99% wired. The only wireless part of the network is the signal between this device and the closest antenna. And that is essentially getting shorter and shorter. The other point I want to respond to is in terms of what's exciting in this space, in the wireless space, there's still great use for Wi-Fi. I mean, that is not a licensed spectrum. That is an unlicensed spectrum. That means that anybody can use it. So local governments, nonprofit entities can play a huge role in terms of developing Wi-Fi hotspots in neighborhoods, creating mesh networks in neighborhoods, for example. And that's really where the banks come in.
Oh, thanks. We're going to finance it for you. I think small business is something that, is key here for us. Our economy in San Antonio and larger scale Texas is run by small business, right? And so how are we helping scale up our small businesses to take advantage of technology to the degree that they can be more successful and increase their revenues? And so for us, I think our focus right now is really honing in on small business. I came earlier from a small business captains meeting at Maestro Entrepreneur Center. We've invested some dollars in that organization because we realize where the growth is and where the needs are. And so for us, as a bank, not only to help finance some of these projects, right? But continuing to look at what the pulse of the community is in terms of need and access to credit, but it's really access to some of those other conversations that include merchant services, provide payroll, all encompassing so that it's easier for a small business to be profitable. And that all comes back down to technology and access to what they have available for them.
Okay, and then I think we're close to our time too.
Yes,
so.
Gabe, you've said just so many great things. I think it's important to have a healthy level of skepticism is what I wanted to say. I think with any new technology, the point you made to start off is that there is always potential for exacerbating that divide, and I think it's important to look at a technology and think, is this going to serve the have-nots as well as the haves? And the Alliance, I think, has a very critical role to play in that this education is really important. Like, we've thrown a lot of terms out there. 5G, spectrum. There's so much potential in spectrum. I think we'd probably have a separate panel on spectrum. Everyone would be asleep in like 5 minutes, but it's really important. And so it's like that education and these convenings are so important because the recommendations, the hard questions, those are things that need to be posed to providers because providers listen. We listen, and at the end of the day, it's about reaching consumers, and consumers have power. And so I think that the more educated and empowered that consumers are, the more of these sort of conversations that happen, you can then inform us, right? So it doesn't have to be this tops down, these are your choices. It's 5G or that. It's, you know, that, I think that there's so many more diverse options there, and I'm really happy that you guys brought up all of these different methods.
Thank you, Clarissa, and thank you to all of our panelists. I think that's it for today.
Good job, everybody.
Way to take the lead on a lot of those questions.
everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started with our closing remarks. So first of all, thank you to all of y'all for being here. If you were here since the morning, raise your hand. How many people? Yeah. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Way to go. I'm a clapper, so I clap a lot. Thank y'all very, very much for sticking with us. Did somebody learn something new today? Raise your hand. I did. Was somebody surprised by something they learned today? Yeah? Did somebody make a new friend today? Yay. Let's see, what else? Did somebody take public transportation here today? Bonus question. No? All right. We're not there yet. That's the next summit. Oh, we got one. Yep, public transportation. Carpool. Did somebody carpool here today? Scootered? Oh, God. Just seeing what we got. Well, first of all, I want to say I have to acknowledge my two other tri-chairs. So thank you to Jordana Barton. Thank you to Deanne Cuellar. Both of y'all are amazing rock stars, and I look up to both of you, so thank you for including me in this tripod of awesomeness. Thank you. And so now that we're at the end of the day, I feel like we have a lot of homework, we have a lot of work to do, we have a lot to get done, but before that, we have some closing remarks from a special guest. So I'm going to read off her bio because I want to make sure that I properly do this. And of course, I messed up the page. Give me one sec. All right. So, first elected to City Council in 2013, Rebecca Villagran has been a tireless advocate in the effort to create equity, opportunity, and prosperity for all San Antonians. Born and raised on the south side of San Antonio, Councilwoman Villagran has deep ties and a deep passion for her community, which is obvious because she's here with us today with this important topic. From an early age, Rebecca's family instilled into her the value of serving others. She was taught that there is nothing more important than helping to build opportunity to ensure everybody has the ability to reach their fullest potential. Councilwoman Villagran graduated from Texas State University, where she earned a Bachelor of Science in Urban and Regional Planning. So this obviously is why we need your brain to help us, because you have the experience. She then attended St. Mary's University, earning a master's degree in public administration. Please help me welcome Councilwoman Rebecca Villagran.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for staying with us all day. It is my honor to be here with you all today at the first ever the second Digital Inclusion Summit here. So my first ever Digital Inclusion Summit. So thank you all very much for having me on this extremely important topic. And even the theme, Connect Todos, with digital inclusion and upward mobility is something that we've been talking a lot, economic and upward mobility for all San Antonians. So thank you all very much for having me. My name is Rebecca Villagran. I do have the great honor of serving on the City Council representing District 3, the south and the southeast side of San Antonio. That's right, the south side is here. So I want to thank all of our tri-chairs today and all of the sponsors and all of you who are out here sharing the information, who showed up. Because half of the battle, actually the majority of the battle, is showing up. And what we are doing here today, too, is continuing to learn from one another and have that creative collaboration that needs to happen as we continue to move the needle in our city, to reach and to move these disparities that exist in our city. I know this morning you heard from one of my colleagues, Councilmember Pelaez, and I'm glad I heard he always is very animated. So I'm very happy that he was here this morning to share a lot about what we have been doing at the city level and with the council, especially with our new Innovation and Technology Committee at the City of San Antonio. I am very appreciative of our Office of Innovation, who is doing a lot of the legwork and legwork, grunt work, carrying the water for the work that we are doing with our smart city initiatives, but with our innovation zones too. One of the things we try to do in all of this at the city is seeing where are the ties, where's the interconnectedness that exists here. I know it was brought up because I saw something online this morning, and then last week we're doing some work on an inclusive growth strategy. I am the chair of the Economic and Workforce Development Committee for the city of San Antonio, and one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we did at the city for economic and workforce development is as we grow and give economic opportunity in a more inclusive way. So we are looking at an inclusive growth strategy for businesses and business retention and expansion in the city of San Antonio. So that when companies come to the city, that they are not just necessarily looking at the north side of the city, but they're looking at all parts of the city as they come to make their case, or San Antonio pitches to them. And one of the things that we discovered we did a distressed index survey, a distressed community index in our city. And so when you looked at the distressed communities in our city, you see how the map is laid out. And that map, I don't have it on here, but that map of distressed communities is very similar to that map that you saw earlier today of where the digital inclusion and the digital disparities exist. It's almost identical as well to the health inequity standards that exist in the city of San Antonio. And as was pointed out by Ms. Pat Hasso, it's almost exactly as the voter turnout in the city of San Antonio as well. So we have all of these connections that are happening, and there's this interconnectedness that we as a city are trying to work with the Digital Inclusion Alliance and others to see where can we collaborate creatively together. We're trying to do that at the city level as well. When you look at what we're doing with our SA Tomorrow plan, and one of the things why it's so important for me to move forward with the SA Tomorrow plan is because we can't have this plan sit on a shelf. We have to plan it in collaboration with the other things that are happening in the city of San Antonio, transportation, development. We're seeing the growth that's happening, but we have to make sure that all of our community is connected and included as we grow. Now, I know, so District 3 is the south side, and it's one of the largest districts in the city, and it is, I always say, it is representative of the past, the present, and the future of San Antonio. Yes, I have 4 of the 5 missions in my district, so it's also the beginning of the city. I have the wonderful mission reach in the community, and one of the things that I'm very proud of too is that we also have pre-K for SA, the first pre-K for SA, the South Center there. We also have Texas A&M San Antonio out in District 3 as well, and we also have the University of Incarnate Word School of Osteopathic Medicine, the second medical school in the city of San Antonio. And you all may have heard, I think it was last week or the week before, SAISD is doing their new CAST Med High School out there on the Brooks campus as well. So you have all of this great innovation and all of this great growth that is happening. And we also find the pockets of this infrastructure that exists throughout the area. I do want to give kudos to Deanne and one of my predecessors who did make sure that they put wireless in Southside Lions Park, wireless connection in Southside Lions Park, to make sure that we had that wireless connection in a city park, one of the largest regional parks in our community too, especially in District 3. And then that's kind of started this whole connection of we need to do this more. How can we do this more? Our libraries, as was mentioned earlier too, is a great area of where my community comes and reaches out and gets involved. Now, I know you have the total numbers here, but why there is the disparity, and there is a disparity, and there is a need for inclusion. I have 3 public libraries in my district: McCreeless Library, Mission Library, and Pan American Library. In my Mission Branch Library, in 2017, the usage highlights in just one of my branch libraries, 223,371 patrons that we had come through that library. Computer hours there was 28,251 computer hours used at the library, that one library. And 79,265 hours of Wi-Fi were used at that library. Toyota Motor Manufacturing Texas has given a donation for McCreeless Library for more Wi-Fi hotspots to be checked out and to put more laptops there, because this is where my residents and my community is going to use the internet, because the affordability is not there for them in their house, in their neighborhoods, or in their multifamily, in their apartment complex. Now, I think part of the issue that has to do is the education and connecting with the community. And our providers need to make sure that they reach out to our neighbors and our community to let them know what is actually available and what is affordable for their family, and maybe even what it is that we need to do to budget this way. Now, in total, in District 3, the computer hours for all 3 libraries for 2017 was 65,410 hours used, computer hours used. The hours of Wi-Fi was 165,431 hours used for Wi-Fi. These are residents who are coming to apply for jobs, because most of the jobs you have to go online now. These are students finishing up their homework and doing their research. This is people who want to serve on District 3 boards and commissions, who have to come to the library to fill out an application for serving on a board and commission. And if they do not have this access in their home, they can only come to a library. Or they can go to one of our senior centers if they are seniors, because that is another thing that we have been investing in as a city, to come forward and to put those access into our senior centers, because there is that feeling of what we're talking about, isolation, of living by themselves without that interaction with people, but the only interaction they have is on their wireless mobile phone. But they need to have that connection and that education. Someone said earlier today, it's about connectivity, affordability, and the skill sets, and to knowing those skills. And I couldn't agree more, because that's what we need to do in our city and in our community. Now, I wanted to share more details about District 3, because I think, as I mentioned, District 3 is the past, the present, and the future, and we are representative of the city. So District 3, we have about 138,000 residents, and the median household income for my district is $36,280. That is the median household income. And our population consists of 82% Hispanic, 12% white, and 4% black. And 9% of residents, as of now, 9% of residents in District 3 have bachelor's degrees. And 63% has a high school degree or less. Now, District 3, I have the great opportunity, to work with 4 different school districts. I have East Central ISD, Southside ISD, SAISD, and Harlandale ISD. So that's 4 different school districts, 4 different superintendents, 4 different school boards that work in the community. And I also have the opportunity to work with 3 different congressional representatives, Doggett, Hurd, and Castro. So we have to work, I'm not saying anything about gerrymandering, but that's gerrymandering. So, but that is just talking about the need for creative collaboration and willing to put whatever ideological issues that you have to the side to work together for solutions to close that gap of that digital, to have that digital inclusion for our entire community. One of those areas that we're trying to, that is a proving ground for the district, and you hear us talk about it a lot because we have a lot of opportunity there, is at Brooks. And the Brooks campus is very interesting because it has the high school, because it has the medical school, because it has high wage earners that live there, and because it is also a former Air Force base that happens to have some great underground fiber ducts there that we can tap into and use in that area. And we also have the opportunity, it is an innovation zone for the city of San Antonio now. And because we have so much space there, it is going to be one of our proving grounds for whatever new technology or little things that we want to try for the city that then we can replicate in other parts of the city if it works there. We have to be available for that opportunity. And I want to thank you all for being here at this location, and having this conversation, because there are different views, there are issues that come to mind, and there are creative ways we all think that we know the right way of doing things or not, but I think we need to just work creatively and, again, collaboratively. And I have to say, too, as we're meeting in the Innovations and Technology Committee, and we're talking about the FCC rules and what's coming up at the federal level, we go to Washington, D.C. as a community to talk about what these rules mean, what that means for our city, and what that means for access, what that means for everything. And as I talked about it, and as we listen to it and we see the different maps, it just comes down to, it's a matter of justice for me. It's a matter of social justice for me to have this digital inclusion and this topic of digital inclusion kind of paint all of our planning as we move forward in this city. As we move forward in the topic of SA Tomorrow, this has to be a part of our, and it is a part of our planning discussion as we move forward with SA Tomorrow. Well, then what are we going to do with who are our providers of fiber or high-speed internet? Who are the nonprofit partners who are doing things for education and skills? We have to have everybody sitting together, willing to work to have these conversations of closing this gap on the digital, or to create this digital inclusion. Because if we don't, then we're short-selling our entire city of San Antonio, our workforce, our education, and our growth as a city, and our ability to recruit businesses to this city if we don't have this all over equitably divided amongst our city. Because I will say, I'm tired of seeing maps that look like this. As a native daughter of the south side of San Antonio, as one who, I'm tired of seeing maps like that. We need to be willing to put that in all of in the areas that need the most resources. Some people talk about, you know, if we put more money on one side of town, it's the, what is the term? A rising tide lifts all boats. Well, not if the boats aren't all the same type of boat, not if the boats are all fixed. If there are some boats that have holes in them, then a rising tide doesn't lift all boats. So we need to make sure that everyone is starting at the same level, but we already know that's not the case. So your participation and your work and your continued engagement, this is nice to come to a summit, and I'm very proud, and I know many of y'all are practitioners and engaged, but I welcome you, all of you, to come to our next Innovation and Technology Committee meeting, to come to our next Economic and Workforce Development Committee meeting, because we're going to be talking about our inclusive growth strategy. But when we're talking about economic and workforce development, inclusive growth, that has to be digital inclusion has to be a part of that vernacular as well as we talk about it all. So again, it is my joy to be here. I thank you for to the 3 strong women who are bringing this together and bringing this forward. I look forward because we do have some great members on the council who are committed to this, who are wanting to see something done and wanting to talk about policy, about how inclusion, digital inclusion, needs to be talked about in this whole conversation of our budgeting, of our policies, and what are we going to do even with our SA Tomorrow plan. But you all have to be a part of that, because if we don't have your input, I mean, yeah, I was part of urban geography and urban planning, but you all are the practitioners who see it every single day and who know what works for banks, what doesn't work for banks, what is working for our seniors, what's not. So your participation is key. And with that, I want to thank you for having me. I know I'm the only thing between you and your happy hour or happy connecting time. So again, thank you all so much, and I look forward to seeing all of you further engage with the city, and I look forward to hearing what you all have to deliver as we move forward. Thank you all very much.
One more thing, I forgot to thank some really important people besides other folks, but if you are part of the Digital Inclusion Alliance of San Antonio Steering Committee, can you please stand up so we can recognize you? Yeah. So thank you. Also, for everybody in the room, these are the people you have to talk to get involved, so make sure you join one of their committees before you leave today, or else you don't get any snacks. Also, so that's real. If Jordana and Deanne want to join me on stage too, so we can kind of just wave and close out and then send people off, because we're a team. Peer pressure. This is what happens when you have a millennial as a tri-chair, by the way. Just gotta come. Just gotta come. Oh, we're the tres sillas. Yay. Okay, so you can help me close it. What do we say? What do we say? I don't know.
Next year we're in New Orleans.
No, thank you. I don't know if you want to say thank you for coming. Yeah.
Thank you all for coming, for sticking with us through today. We had some of the most incredible panels in the afternoon, so I'm glad that we were all here to discuss these important issues together. Join the Digital Inclusion Alliance. We made a lot of progress this year, in 1 year, establishing our code of what do you call it, governance and bylaws and all of that. So we have a wonderful structure. Right now we're under the Library Foundation, the San Antonio Public Library Foundation, and there's more to come. We're going to be setting the agenda for the year. We have opportunities for leadership in the steering committee. We'll have elections soon. So please join us, and let's stick together to make real change. We're going to try to pick some key projects that we can focus in on and really show results, really bring all the power of all the pieces that Councilwoman Villagran just talked about, and show the impact that we're having, change people's lives, and bring San Antonio. You remember we started with that ranking of cities. We want San Antonio to be on the right side, right? Literally on the side with the highest connectivity and equally higher incomes that goes with it. So let's commit to that, and none of us could do it alone. Certainly we realize that at the Federal Reserve for sure, but we can be a resource in the way that we can, just like all of your organizations bring a piece of the answer, and it helps us to make the kind of advancement that it's very bold. We're trying to do something very bold. We're trying to say, you know, this is a failure, a market failure. We're going to correct this because we can as a community. So let's join together, join the alliance, and I'll turn it over to my co-chairs.
Thank y'all. That's it.
That's it. Let's drink and eat.